Welcome back everyone to another downward day. And today on the channel, I'm finally uploading. I know it's been a while. I've been focusing a lot of attention on main channel projects for the time being. So for all you Downward Diary fans out there, I apologize for neglecting you all for many months at this point. But I'm back. Hopefully the channel is not dead, and I have many more videos planned for the future, starting with today. And today on the channel we have a bit of a heavy, uncomfortable topic to talk about, and that is the standard of living in America. Now, throughout my time making videos for this channel, I've had a variety of opinions to share with you all, some of which a lot of you guys disagree with me on. And you know what, that's fine. I'm not going to get bent up about it. It comes with the territory of sharing opinions on the internet. This next opinion is going to be one that, if you live in America or have any vested interest in the health of America, that you should agree with me on. It is important that you agree with me on just this one thing. Everything else, you can call me an idiot, you can call me stupid, but this one thing, if you don't see eye to eye with me on this, then you're potentially opening yourself up for a lifetime of misery. And the point I'm trying to make here comes down to a very simple question. Is the standard of living in the United States of America rising or falling? As of right now, 2023, do you feel like the arrow of progress in America is going up or down? And I'll cut the crap at this point, because if you clicked on the video, you already know what it's about. But in my view, and from my perspective as being a consumer and American taxpayer, I don't really understand how you can reach any other conclusion than the idea that the standard of living in America is declining each successive day in this country, based on how things are currently running, how the system and the machine is currently operating. Each successive day on the American calendar is less prosperous than the one that came before it. And I almost hesitate to frame this whole idea as an opinion, because it's about as close as you can get, in my mind, to demonstrable fact. The standard of living in America is declining. There's really no way to get around it. I mean, unless you live in America and you're particularly affluent, or you are in a particularly fortunate situation and life circumstance. If you're one of these oh-so-blessed people who lives in this untouchable bubble, free from the dominion of the actual problems that we have created for American citizens in this society, if you're not in your magic protective bubble of wealth, I don't really see how it's possible for anyone to go out into American society, engage with the American economy on a day-to-day basis, earn a wage, consume products which are getting more and more expensive, and think to yourself, I think that as things stand right now, we're headed to a brighter future. I really don't understand how, if you're an average American who empirically exists and interacts with American society, how you can think that the arrow of America is still going up. And honestly, at least my understanding of the situation is, that arrow has not been pointed up for maybe 50 years now. But for the past 45 years, politicians and American institutions have done a really good job of duct taping the holes in the rapidly deteriorating structure of society. I'll give it to them, the powers that be. They did a good job at covering up and obfuscating the writing on the wall. But the fact of the matter is, the American economy has not really been in that good a shape since the 1970s. And with that being said, I know many of you are immediately pointing at the screen and saying, well, the stock market has been up so much since the 70s. It's perfectly reasonable to dump 8% of your paycheck into the SPY and get 8% returns a year. Company value is just going to infinitely go up forever, for the end of time. And yes, it stands to reason that in a country where corporations have hijacked the entire monetary system to benefit their own private individual interests, it stands to reason that their company valuations will go up over time. But what about the valuations of the rest of us? It's interesting to me that when you ask most people to define the economy, which is supposed to be the great overarching measure of the standard of living in a country, when you ask people to define what the economy is, the default response is always, oh, is just stocks? Stocks? Is my stock price up? Is my new determined value of a human being up? Oh God, I don't know what I'm going to do if my stock price doesn't go up. Most people nowadays believe that the economy is just the stock market. And that's been useful. That's been very useful in convincing people and giving people the biggest cope that the health of the economy has been on the rise in the past 50 years. Because look at the stock! Look at the stock! My stock went up! That must mean that people in America are doing better than they were 50 years ago. That must mean that the purchasing power of the average American citizen is higher than it was 50 years ago. That surely must mean that people are healthier and living longer than they were 50 years ago. And maybe if you set the clock back 50 years, our life expectancy would be superior. But in the last 25 years, you'll find that rather disturbingly, in the United States of America, people aren't really living longer. All this money being dumped into the stock market, being dumped into the market cap of pharmaceutical, biotech, health industry companies, general technology companies that you'd think would ease the quality of our life and make things easier, make things less stressful, make people less susceptible to get chronic, debilitating illnesses at the age of 70. You'd think that with the amount of value the stock has added over that duration, that regular people, regular Americans would have access to significantly better tools to actually improve their health. And that perhaps the average life expectancy in the United States would be equal or maybe even higher than all of the other developed first world economies on the planet. But oh my God, have you heard the news? It doesn't really get reported that much, but we've fallen behind. We've fallen behind Japan and Sweden and Germany and all these other countries that American industry is supposed to be economically superior to. For whatever reason, big mystery, we've fallen behind them. Average Americans are dying way earlier than the average German and the average Japanese. And it's not by a small amount. It's not by some trivial margin of error that can be explained by randomness or some sort of statistical variance. Americans are living about 10 years shorter at this point, a decade. You get a decade off your life from being born into America versus being born into Japan. My oh my, how can this be? The stock price went up, but the average life expectancy, which I'd say is probably more of a tangible measurement of the actual standard of living and quality of life in a nation. Stock prices have done this in America for 50 years. Life expectancy, we're not really improving. We haven't really shown any tangible improvements in life expectancy in 25 years. Now again, you tell me, is that a positive indicator of standard of living, where Americans are dying about a decade earlier than all these other first world developed nations that we were once well ahead of in terms of science and technology, and yes, actual real standard of living? But if you want to really talk about the economy, the true economy, as this all-encompassing monetary system that influences and affects each and every one of our lives. If you want to talk about the real nature of the economy and its real effects on real people, you're not going to get much useful information by looking at the stock price of Halliburton, by looking at the stock price of Lockheed Martin. Those things have become so detached from the plight of the average American citizen that it should almost be treated as a non sequitur. The stock price of Halliburton should almost be treated the same as trying to assess the standard of living in America by talking about the price of flowers in Antarctica. You might as well be speaking gibberish, because what the hell does it matter to me, or 99.9% of other Americans, what the stock price of Halliburton is? What I'm interested in knowing is my stock, the quality of my stock as an American consumer. If you put me in the average American job, earning an average American wage, what exactly would that get me? What exactly would that imply in my ability to shape and control my destiny? And oh boy, it turns out that all of a sudden, if you flip the perspective of the economic equation, and rather than considering what the economy has done for Halliburton, you consider what it has actually accomplished for the average American citizen, lo and behold, all of a sudden your insight into the quality of the economy is quite different. And the last 50 years have told quite a different story. Because in the last 50 years, the actual purchasing power of average median Americans, the amount of physical spoils that you are actually rewarded for your time and your labor in participating in the economy, the purchasing power of Americans in the last several decades especially has been completely destroyed. In the 1970s, it was reasonable to buy a decent home on a teacher's salary. Can you even believe that? If you describe that scenario to people actually participating in the economy today, it sounds like a fairy tale. In the 60s and 70s, you could reasonably pay for your college tuition by getting a part-time job bagging groceries at a grocery store. Again, to consider such a scenario today, in the present day American economy, it's almost laughable. But no, our standard of living is definitely better today because our stock prices are higher. Hey, all you people in your teens and 20s watching this video, would you rather have high stock prices, arbitrarily high numbers that you don't even get to participate in the vast majority of circumstances? Would you rather have high stock prices or being able to pay your way through college with a summer job at a grocery store? Would you rather have OMG Lockheed Martin stock at all-time highs or pay for a decent house off of a teacher's salary? Which people do you think got the better deal in that circumstance, us or them? And I've been harping on this point for so long, just to hammer in this idea that by and large, American society is not better off than it was 50 years ago by most tangible measures that actually affect individual American workers, consumers, and laborers. Things have gotten worse to a significant degree in a lot of measurables. But a lot of people don't like to admit that this is the reality. A lot of people don't like to admit that this is the truth about America, and that's that the arrow of America is pointed downwards. It's been pointed downwards for a lot longer than what many people think. And this very simple and clear idea that the standard of living in America is declining, it's not something you're going to hear from hardly anyone or anything. The institutions in power, the people who actually serve to benefit from the stock going up and the value of your labor going down, of course they're going to say that everything's fine. Of course they're going to say that everything's going according to plan. The people, institutions, and corporations who have demonstrably benefited most from the modern economic system, of course they're going to say it's fine. Of course, the mainstream media, who depend on these very same companies for ad revenue, of course they're going to say that nothing's wrong and that we have nothing to worry about and that somehow the American worker is just as good today, is just as well off as they were 50 years ago. We're supposed to be in just as good of a situation. And if there's an obvious, unignorable problem, it's just transitory. And very smart people are working to fix it. They're definitely not working to maintain the status quo and just continue the complete leeching of wealth from the average American into the pockets of the small, oligopoly who actually calls the shots in this country. It's okay, guys. We're working really hard. We're working really hard to bring inflation down from 15% a year to 11% a year. Oh, and how are those 8% a year SPY returns, permanent, perpetual, forever returns, working out for you guys, by the way? So when faced with the question of whether America's standard of living is increasing or not, you have to bear in mind that there's a lot of pressure for people, certain people, to insist that everything's working, that you're just as well off as your grandparents' generation. Everything's fine. You don't have to worry. We can just pay 100 different think tanks to spit out whatever circumstantial data to prove what we already know is completely impossible, painting a complete fraudulent astroturf reality that somehow American workers are better off today than they were in the 1970s and the 1960s. All because we have an iPhone and $700 insulin. That's supposed to make us feel like we're better off. But a lot of people end up believing it regardless. They ignore the plain, simple reality in front of their eyes, and they fall into the propaganda and the manipulation, and they really work themselves up to believe that, yeah, everything's fine. Yeah, things are getting better. And look, I don't exactly want to blame these people or wag the finger at them being useful idiots or whatever. It's natural to want to be patriotic and have faith in the systems and the institutions that rule over us. And it certainly contributes to a lot less anxiety to convince yourself that, oh, they're on our side, they're working for us. They really care about the average American being wealthier than their very specific interests becoming wealthier. The world becomes a whole lot less scary and intimidating if you believe that our corporate overlords and our political overlords are on our side, and that they actually truly really care about the interests of the average American. So I get it. I get why people think that way. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. But if you have to cross a deep and raging river, believing that the bridge isn't broken isn't going to do anything for you. Either the bridge is stable or it's not. And if you walk across it, it's going to completely collapse and leave you drowning up shit creek. And it's all fine and dandy believing that the bridge was functional until you had to cross it. So you can believe what you want about the health of the American economy and the value of the average American worker. But sooner or later, everyone has to cross that bridge. Everyone has to make a plan for what they're going to do about their financial future. And if you're planning your life around this idea that the arrow of America is still going up, well, I'm just going to warn you, you're going to be in for a nasty surprise, more than likely. Because a lot changes. A lot changes over what is good and bad financial planning based on whether that arrow is pointed up or down. There are a lot of people, young people particularly, in this country right now who have structured their entire lives and their entire situation banking and hoping and praying on the idea that that arrow really is still pointed upward. And they're standing right in the middle of a bridge that's about to collapse and send them into the abyss. So if you're watching this video and you're a young person in particular, someone who still has their financial future ahead of them, if you are a young American watching this video, still figuring things out, I strongly suggest that you really take a good look at your life and consider the consequences of what exactly it implies for the arrow of America to be pointed down. What exactly it implies and what your role should be in a culture and a society that is gradually declining and crumbling and is perpetually worse off in the present than it was in the past. You need to really think about how you're going to structure your life in a declining economy, because it's not going to be the same than if the standard of living was going up and up and up. It is not going to be the same at all. There is a whole separate philosophy that you have to employ with the idea, the prevailing idea, that tomorrow is not going to be as good as today. And in some of the next few videos I plan on recording, I'm going to try to explore what some of these deeper implications of a failing, declining economy actually mean for you and me and everyone else who has to deal with the consequences of generations of bad decisions that have left us in the situation we're in today. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, even though it's quite a depressing one. But if you come out of it with anything, I hope you've learned that now is not a good time to run across any bridges.